If you're someone who grew up in the 90s or early 2000s, I can guarantee that WWE was a massive part of your life. Whether it was coming home after a long day of school or work, you could turn on the TV, forget about everything else, and completely immerse yourself into this wild world of larger-than-life characters and insane storylines.
The Undertaker and The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin!
Whether it was Stone Cold stunning his boss, Kane setting people on fire, Jeff Hardy jumping from insane heights, The Rock laying the SmackDown, Edge making out with Lita, John Cena refusing to give up,
John Cena never quit!
Batista being the coolest man on the planet, or The Undertaker rising from the dead to collect another soul.
The Undertaker's alive and well!
For 2 hours every Monday and Friday night, you could forget about homework, forget about your problems, forget about your responsibilities, and just lose yourself in this wacky universe where anything could happen. And if it was a pay-per-view, boy, that would feel like the night before Christmas. You couldn't wait to experience the unique sets and special atmosphere. And you couldn't sleep thinking about the madness that was about to unfold in a few hours. It was magic. It was must-see. It was a cultural phenomenon that had everyone from kids to adults absolutely glued to their screens. But here's the thing. When you go back and watch those old episodes today, you realize it wasn't just nostalgia. There was something genuinely special happening during that era. Something that made WWE feel like the most important thing in the world every single week. So what exactly made WWE in the 90s and 2000s so damn special? Let's take a trip down memory lane and find out together. A story is only as good as its characters, and back in the day, WWE was a masterpiece of unforgettable characters. Whether it was Steve Austin rebelling against the corporate machine, The Rock as the most electrifying man in all of entertainment,
People's sunglasses! It's the most electrifying move in sports entertainment today! Oh, the people's elbow!
The Undertaker who stared death in the face, Shawn Michaels as the arrogant, narcissistic heartbreak kid, or Triple H as the cunning and calculating cerebral assassin, every single character had their own unique personality, their own clear motives, their own driving force that made them stand out and made you genuinely invest in their journey. You genuinely wanted to see what obstacles Vince would throw in Stone Cold's path the next night and how he would overcome them while drinking beer and flipping people off. You wanted to see what lengths Randy Orton would go to torment The Undertaker and how long he could keep getting away with it before Taker got his revenge on the legend killer.
I'm gonna beg you, please, have mercy on my son.
You were captivated by the unique high-flying style of Rey Mysterio, the sly and manipulative tactics of Edge, who would literally sacrifice his own girlfriend to win a championship, the death-defying daredevilry of Jeff Hardy, the creepy and unsettling antics of the Boogeyman, and the never-give-up attitude of John Cena that made kids believe they could overcome anything. Every character had its own solid foundation and clear motivations that differentiated them from the rest of the roster. Edge wasn't just a guy who wanted to win, he was a master manipulator who would seduce the SmackDown general manager Vicky Guerrero,
The wedding is off!
fake his own feelings, and use every dirty trick in the book because being champion meant everything to him.
Because you lost the championship, have you lost your mind, Cal?
Triple H wasn't just a bad guy. He was this calculating politician who would marry the boss's daughter and systematically destroy anyone who threatened his position at the top. But if you take a look at the roster today, you can barely tell anyone apart. Everyone just seems to blend together because the art of character development has been completely misunderstood. Today's WWE thinks having a catchy theme song and a few generic catchphrases equals character development. And it's honestly insulting to what wrestling used to be. If you ask a fan today what drives Cody Rhodes after WrestleMania 40, they won't be able to give you a clear answer. Sure, up until Mania 40, Cody's character was crystal clear. He was the guy who wanted to finish his story and restore his father's legacy by winning the championship that Dusty Rhodes never could.
For Cody Rhodes, it is a must-win.
But since then, he's been completely directionless. Just another generic good guy holding a belt with no clear motivation or personality beyond smiling and saying he's happy to be champion. Now put that in contrast to someone like Steve Austin. Every single fan back then knew exactly what Austin represented. He was this beer-drinking, rule-breaking redneck who hated authority figures
Have you broken every one of them? Because I don't care about him. What are you gonna do about it?
and would raise hell every single Monday night just because he could. Or take Roman Reigns today compared to Edge from back in the day. Edge had this burning obsession with becoming champion that drove every single thing he did. He would cash in Money in the Bank when the champion was in the worst shape.
Edge is cashed in the Money in the Bank. He won on Raw Monday night.
He would manipulate relationships, he would burn bridges, and do absolutely anything to hold that title. But what motivates Roman Reigns since his return at SummerSlam? Who is the OTC? What is his goal, and what are his motivations? Nobody knows, including WWE themselves apparently, because he's just been floating around with no clear direction or character development whatsoever. That's the difference. Back then, every character had a soul, a purpose, a reason for existing that made you care about what happened to them next. And this is what made you ultimately care about what happened inside the ring. You see, at its core, pro wrestling is an art form where the story drives the action inside that squared circle.
It's not the matches, it's the stories that lead us to the moment.
Without a solid emotional foundation, the in-ring action just becomes meaningless acrobatics and choreographed dance routines. And WWE seems to have completely forgotten this fundamental principle that made their product so special. Back in the day, every move, every high spot, every brutal chair shot had genuine meaning behind it. Jeff Hardy didn't just jump off ladders because he wanted to pop the fans or go viral on Twitter. He did it because he was desperately trying to get revenge on Randy Orton for injuring his brother.
Jeff Hardy is trying to finish this thing. Jeff Hardy is trying to finish Randy Orton.
John Cena didn't go absolutely ham on Edge just because he wanted to show he was some 5-star technical powerhouse wrestler. He did it because he wanted to make him pay for breaking into his home, attacking his father, and crossing a line that should never be crossed.
He was a bad guy.
Triple H and Shawn Michaels didn't destroy each other with chairs, sledgehammers, and kendo sticks so they could get a 5-star rating from Dave Meltzer. They did it because they absolutely hated each other's guts. Triple H was consumed with jealousy over Shawn's natural talent and charisma, and Shawn wanted to get back at his former best friend for stabbing him in the back. The in-ring action back in the day served as a vehicle for storytelling, not as the story itself. It didn't feel polished. It didn't feel like a rehearsed performance. It felt like these wrestlers genuinely wanted to tear each other apart, and that raw emotion translated through the screen and grabbed you by the throat. You believed that Kane actually wanted to burn his opponents alive. That Mick Foley was willing to sacrifice his body to hurt his opponent. That Randy Orton genuinely wanted to send his opponents to the hospital when he kicked them in the skull. Compare that to today, where every move seems calculated for maximum visual impact. Every spot is designed specifically to get a pop from the crowd or to trend on Twitter. Wrestlers are doing backflips and moonsaults just because they can, not because it serves any purpose in telling their story. The grungy emotional intensity is what made wrestling feel special, but when you replace that with aerial acrobatics and gymnastics routines, it just feels phony and manufactured. The in-ring action should always be a means to an end, not an end in itself. And that brings us to the most important factor that made everything WWE so special back then: the stories. Storylines back in the day weren't just wrestling angles. They were deeply personal, emotionally charged sagas that felt authentic and had fans completely invested in every twist and turn. You genuinely wanted to see Triple H beat the living hell out of Randy Orton, not because you cared about who was the better technical wrestler, but because you needed Triple H to get revenge on Randy for attacking his wife and family.
This is personal. I'm gonna break your neck.
You wanted DX to absolutely humiliate the McMahons, not because you wanted to see some wrestling masterpiece, but because Vince and his son represented everything corrupt about corporate authority, and you desperately wanted to see them get their comeuppance. You couldn't wait for Kane and The Undertaker to finally settle their differences in that ring, not just because they were these giant freaks of nature putting on a spectacle, but because you were completely invested in their story of half-brothers torn apart by tragedy, fire, and betrayal.
The Undertaker, look into the eyes of this younger brother.
The emotional weight of Paul Bearer revealing that Kane was Undertaker's brother, who he thought he'd killed in a fire 20 years ago.
The father was the mortician who ran the funeral home. The mother was the secretary, the receptionist, but there were 2 little kids there.
That wasn't just wrestling, that was Shakespearean family drama that had you on the edge of your seat. Remember Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio's custody battle over Dominic?
Following contest is a ladder match for the custody of Dominic.
It wasn't about who could hit better moves or who was the better high flyer. It was about a father trying to protect a child from a man claiming to be his real father.
You're gonna love me. You know why? 'Cause I'm your new daddy now. That's it.
When Eddie would manipulate and lie his way into Ray's head, making him question everything about his relationship with Dominic, you felt genuinely uncomfortable because it touched on real fears about family, identity, and betrayal that everyone could relate to. When Edge kept stealing wins from Cena using every underhanded tactic he could, you genuinely wanted Cena to get his revenge against the slimy bastard because at some point in life, you were wronged in a similar way. These stories are what made WWE must-see, and that's what kept fans coming back week after week to see how our favorite heroes would overcome impossible odds and how the most hated villains would meet their eventual downfall. Every storyline had stakes that mattered, characters you cared about, and emotional payoffs that felt earned. But if you tune into WWE today, there's barely any storytelling that makes you want to emotionally invest in what's happening. Every Monday, you tune into Raw, and all you get is Jey Uso randomly yelling "Yeet" with no context.
Yeet. The Yeet Master.
Or a random Logan Paul appearance that serves no purpose other than getting mainstream attention. There's no passion, no personal investment, no stories that make you care about these people as human beings. Every story today seems to revolve around who's the better wrestler or who deserves a championship opportunity. And in 2025, when everyone knows the outcome is scripted, that's not a very compelling reason to tune in week after week. Even the much-anticipated John Cena heel turn has been completely wasted on random celebrity appearances and tag team matches that serve no purpose than to trend for a few seconds on social media. There's no emotional hook, no personal stakes, no reason to care beyond just watching athletic performances. The magic happened when wrestling felt like it mattered to the characters involved, when their entire lives and identities were on the line. And speaking of magic, the way WWE presented these incredible stories back then made everything feel magical, special, and larger than life. The unique vibe every show had back then was absolutely magical. Raw had this red, grungy underground feel that made it seem like you were watching something rebellious. SmackDown had the iconic blue lighting with that massive fist entrance that gave it a special touch. Tuning into every show felt like entering its own completely different world with its own personality and atmosphere. Every single pay-per-view had its own unique identity that you could feel the moment the show started. Armageddon had this apocalyptic end-of-the-world vibe. Cyber Sunday had this futuristic, interactive atmosphere. The Great American Bash brought that southern, patriotic energy that made you feel like you were at a real American celebration. Judgment Day had this courtroom, trial-like presentation where justice was finally going to be served. Hell in a Cell transformed the entire arena into this demonic, hellish environment that made you worry about the wrestlers' safety. Every pay-per-view had its own unique soul, its own reason for existing, its own special feeling that differentiated it from everything else on the calendar. You knew exactly what you were getting into based on which show you were watching. But today, every show has the same generic LED board setup. Backlash feels exactly the same as Money in the Bank, which feels the same as SummerSlam, which feels the same as a random episode of NXT. Watching a pay-per-view doesn't feel any different than watching a normal episode of Raw or SmackDown because there's absolutely nothing that makes these events feel special anymore.
Hell in the Cell, Money in the Bank, Elimination Chamber, maybe those things should all go away.
But that's not even the worst part. Imagine you're watching an action movie and every single scene is interrupted by an advertisement break because that's exactly what WWE feels like today.
This is very good.
Advertisements plastered everywhere you look.
Dallas, you're not dreaming. My company, Prime Hydration, has partnered with the WWE.
On the ring mat, the announce tables, and even the championship belts. There's absolutely no way to suspend your disbelief when you're constantly being reminded that you're watching a 3-hour commercial. Back in the day, even if you knew the outcomes were predetermined, you were emotionally invested because the atmosphere was absolutely perfect. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler's unfiltered commentary added a raw, authentic vibe that made every match and segment feel important. Entering a WWE arena felt like entering a sacred coliseum where gladiators settled their differences, not some corporate boardroom disguised as entertainment. It was a place to witness history, to see legends being made, to watch ordinary people become gods, not to advertise the latest energy drink or crypto partnership. That unpolished, grungy authenticity is what made wrestling its own unique art form. The blood, the violence, the raw emotion, everything served a purpose. It had a soul that you could feel through the television screen. When you heard that glass shatter, It sent electricity through your entire body because you knew Stone Cold was about to raise some hell. When Shawn Michaels' boyhood dream came true at WrestleMania 12,
The boyhood dream has come true.
it made you believe that your dreams really could come true if you never gave up. When that same career ended at WrestleMania 26 against The Undertaker,
Shawn Michaels' career is over.
it made you cry because you were watching the end of an era. When Taker's WrestleMania streak came to an end at the hands of Brock Lesnar,
My time has come to let The Undertaker rest in peace.
it made you question everything you thought you knew about wrestling because the impossible had just happened right before your eyes. When Jeff Hardy finally won the WWE Championship, it was a tale of dreams, triumph, and redemption.
Hardy wins! Jeff Hardy wins! Jeff Hardy's realized the dream of a lifetime!
When Edge cashed in his money in the bank on your hero, you could feel the desperation of something been stolen from you. When Austin and The Rock stood face to face in the ring, time itself stood still, and you were watching literal gods among men creating history. These moments perfectly captured the pure magic of pro wrestling. The belief, the emotion, the larger-than-life spectacle that made you forget about reality for a few precious hours. For 2 hours every Monday and Friday, we were transported to a world where good could triumph over evil, where underdogs could overcome impossible odds, where justice would eventually be served and dreams could actually come true. That's what made wrestling cool. That's what made it matter. That's what made it absolutely unforgettable. That's what made it so special.